Good morning. I'm just curious, how many people have attended Vulkanised in Munich? Okay. How many people came from outside the United States to be here? How many people attended SIGGRAPH last summer? All right. So some of my presentation will be repeats with some new information, and it's certainly not deep technically, but more of an overview of what's available. So in case you don't know, I'm Karen Ghavam, CEO and engineering director both at LunarG. So with that, here's my next key. Here it is. I thought I'd take a minute just to say who is LunarG, because quite often we're confused as being part of Khronos. We are not. We are actually independent, private company. We do have Khronos membership, but we do a lot of 3D graphics software solutions for our clients. And we've been developing the ecosystem components for Vulkan since before Vulkan launched. I believe we started originally back in 2015. And a lot of this is enabled from generous contributions from Valve and Google that should not be taken for granted. Without their sponsorship, you guys would not have a Vulkan SDK and all the tools that you're using. We work on a lot of projects, of course, the Vulkan SDK, but that's just the final step of sweeping up everything and getting it configured and integrated together and shipping. But all those components that are going into it, actually, we are actively developing and maintaining those components, and I've listed many of them here. So a year ago, every year we do an ecosystem survey, and I thought I'd just start saying the survey for 2023 that was done a year ago. These are some of the highlights of the themes that were in the survey. It was pretty much an even split between self-study developers and people developing for commercial reasons. And there was an increase in the amount of released Vulkan content. Themes, the shader toolchain, it needs more help, more development and maintenance on it. The Microsoft DirectX shader compiler was used by about 20% of the population. 60+% of the population is actually using GL slang to go from GLSL to SpearV. So we do know HLSL is very important, but there are a lot of developers out there still coming from GLSL as well. Validation layers are invaluable. They're asking us to continue to increase coverage of the validation checks. Those error messages, they're verbose, they're pesty, they're hard to interpret. Help us be able to interpret those messages and improve the performance. So those are the themes that we've been hearing. And there's more and more interest in Molten Decay, and they would like to see the Molten Decay platform or solution to be able to move more quickly. And Tom did mention, like, for example, getting to 1.3, I'm sure people would very much appreciate that. I did put some links here for the full report of that survey. And also, a year after we take a survey, we always follow back up with, we listened to what you said. This is what we worked on in the last year and did. Now, I don't get to everything, but I find that very important to do that follow-up report to tell you guys your input is not going to a black hole. We are watching it, we are listening to it, and we're acting on it as best we can. All right, so the Vulkan SDK, I'm sure many of you use it. You can get it at vulkan.lunarg.com. LunarG delivers it very much in close coordination with the Khronos Vulkan Working Group. Up on the left, you'll see the SDK link. And once you follow that link, you'll see that there's SDKs for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. And for Linux, we do both a tarball, but we also deliver up-to-date Ubuntu packages. Now, granted, you can get packages from your Linux distributor. The advantage of these packages are they're the latest and greatest stuff put in that packaged format. Tom talked a little bit, this guy is like flashing, there we go, about the SDK download. So yes, I put some graphs in from our website So we're averaging around 38K a week for Windows. Linux is about 3,000 a week, but this is only the tarball. I do not have an accurate way to measure how many installs of the Ubuntu packages are actually being done, because people can replicate the servers for those all over the place. So I don't include the Ubuntu packages in those numbers. And the Mac SDK is around 5,800 a week, and that's the one that seems to be growing most quickly today, which is interesting. We believe the big jump happened last summer. I believe that was when Apple did announcements of their hardware, and they had some better performing hardware. Perhaps that's what's driving the increase in the interest in the Mac SDK. Of course, we like to believe that we're just doing such an awesome job bringing those tools together for the developers. That's what's driving the interest. But it is interesting increase that's going on there. So why would you want to use the SDK? Because we've come up with a way to install it for you that's easy and fast for all three platforms. All the tools are pre-built and installed in the correct system locations. We do work behind the scenes. It's not for the faint of heart to try to build all the components for the SDK yourself with the right versions. We do vet it and curate the content to make sure it's compatible, integrates well. The Vulcan Configurator is built and ready to use. There are release notes. More of you guys should read the release notes. I have many issues coming in that are in the release notes, but we'll tell you what are known problems and what new features are in the SDK, along with user documentation. And then for the corporations that care, are very sensitive about what open source licenses are being installed across our organization, we do have a license registry that will detail all of the open source licenses in the SDK. So Vulkan Configurator, this is a really important tool, and its increase in usage is demonstrating that it's very useful. It really will simplify your experience with layer enablement and configuration. There are multiple preset default configurations you can use, but you could create your own custom one as well if you would like. Recently added to it was the ability to select your physical device. And next major release, we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. We're going to be focusing on better control of the layers, being able to have multiple versions of a layer that you can select from, full ordering of the layers, improve the user interface for a tab-based implementation, and more diagnostics information integrated into it to help you figure out what's wrong with my Vulkan installation and why are things not working for me. And back at Munich, Christoph, he's here actually again. He did a presentation on using the Vulkan Configurator. You can find that on YouTube, Khronos' YouTube channel, if you want to go look at it. More developer tools in the SDK. Of course, the validation layers are there. In fact, maybe sometimes I wonder if that's the only reason to have the SDK. There are multiple objects in the validation layers, we call them. We have GPU-assisted validation, which validates things that can't be known until it's executing in the GPU. There are best practices. NVIDIA added their best practices August 2022, but we have best practices for ARM, Imagination, and AMD. Synchronization validation is there, and debug printf, which I just simply think of as a printf inside a shader. API dump, very simple layer, just ASCII output of what Vulkan API calls has been used, but it's very popular and used. Vulkan info will show you the device properties for the GPU and extensions, your installed layers, supported image formats, etc. And we have two emulation layers, the Synchronization 2 emulation layer, and added last summer was the shader object emulation layer. So as seen in feedback that we've been getting on the ecosystem survey, we know validation layer performance at times cannot be good. And that just makes sense when you're injecting even more computation or going on with every Vulkan API call. Of course, it's going to slow down, but there are situations where it would slow down to the point that it was unusable. So we've had very focused resource going on inside LunarG. Actually, Jeremy Ghavam was leading this up, and he'll be talking later today to improve the descriptor index validation performance. The problem with that was that the CPU side had serious performance issues and correctness problems because we couldn't know which descriptors were being used and therefore to validate them. So we've moved all that validation into the GPU. This was not a trivial refactor to do this, but it was also refactored that now we can better scale for up to 1 million plus descriptor arrays, and there were significant performance gains. I'll let Ghavam take credit for his efforts. It was not a trivial project. I listed a couple of past performance improvements that we've done, but I think the biggest or most exciting actually is moving a lot of this descriptor index validation into the GPU. Synchronization validation. Synchronization is about identifying your resource access conflicts across draw, copy, dispatch, blit, reading or writing same regions of memory. It's within a single buffer and also between queue submissions and across multiple queues. It also is challenged by performance. This is a challenging thing to track as you are using the Vulkan API. And we're actually working on doing some performance tuning as well there. There are limitations in the current implementation. There's still more functionality that we need to get filled out. And I have listed many of the limitations there. We're working on this over time. Again, I have some dedicated resource inside LunarG really focused on synchronization. This is not something that we get via contributions from the community due to its complexity. So here's some of the performance tuning that's been going on. So Zulaf is also here. He'll be talking about synchronization validation later. So he did a refactor of the queue submits. This graph shows the percent performance gains for, these are many games that you may recognize like Dota 2, Strange Brigade, etc. But I also showed the frames per second before and after as a result of this refactor. Some very significant performance gains, but we still have some more performance bottlenecks that we're working on. So again, Zulaf will be here. He'll be presenting later today, tomorrow. I can't remember exactly where he is on the schedule. I've given a QR code for his presentation. He has written an awesome white paper that's just been updated and posted that I gave a link to. And he's done multiple synchronization, validation presentations in the past. So some resources for you there. More developer tools in the SDK. Vulk, very popular tool. Entry point metaloader, that's been in since June of 2022. Sasha Williams' hardware capabilities viewer from gpuinfo.org is part of the SDK. And also you have the option to launch it right after you install the SDK. The more we can get that database populated with Vulkan configurations out there, the usefulness of that for the overall ecosystem. We also include the elements of the Vulkan portability solution, which enables consistent use of layered implementations of Vulkan functionality over Metal or other APIs. Actually, there are two that I know of actively. Of course, Molten VK is Vulkan to Metal, but also Microsoft has the Dozen driver, which is Vulkan to DirectX. The loader supports the enumeration extension that basically says, yes, give me Vulkan portable implementations when I'm looking for devices. We support the portability subset extension. That one will be changing in the future. Bill Hollings will probably talk about that in more detail. And the profiles layer also provides a profile for simulating the portability subset as well. All right, so the macOS SDK. So Tom said some about this, but new as of the SDK that came out January 19th, I think it was when it released, is iOS is now a supported platform for the Vulkan loader and the layers. It's in beta format. We know a few more things we'd like to do. But what this enables you to do now is on your iOS device, run your application with validation enabled, or API dump, or synchronization to and shader object. These are the layers that we have ported and working on iOS today. This is very useful for people who are targeting iOS as one of their platforms. And Richard will talk more about it, give more details at his presentation later today, again, QR code for what he's going to be discussing. We now have all the Mac SDK components supporting both the Apple Silicon and the Intel architectures. So you don't have to have the Rosetta emulation environment to run your applications anymore. However, you do need it while you install the SDK. Unfortunately, to get the unified libraries for the installation libraries will take some, I believe, serious Qt upgrades to be able to get rid of that. So you have to have the emulation environment just for installation, but once you're installed, you'll be able to run native. And again, I put a link in the presentation about white paper that Richard just updated it on the last week that will detail the iOS information, good information in that paper. So graphics Reconstruct is another tool that we spent quite a bit of time working on. There is actually a lot of vendor interest in this tool. It allows you to capture the Vulkan API in binary format. We support Linux, Windows, and Android. It is architected to be API agnostic. So today we have Vulkan and Direct3D 12, both supported in this tool. And use cases are like bug reporting. It's very useful if an application developer is having a crash on a driver and is thinking maybe this is a driver bug. You could capture this and share it with your vendor of choice for them to reproduce the problem, and you don't have to give them your application and how to build the application, etc. We know of hardware vendors that are using it in their silicon development pipelines, creating workloads that they'll run through their simulators. It's good for testing quality of drivers. Brad Grantham did a presentation at SIGGRAPH last summer that I have put a link in, and also presented at the Munich Vulkanised a year ago. Profiles. So Tom talked a lot about profiles. And yes, profiles is the mechanism you will use for access to the roadmap 2024. Profiles is a mechanism that enables precise specification of capabilities. You can use this then to communicate to other participants in the ecosystem. You can use this to select a range of actual ecosystem devices that you want to target for your application. And yes, Roadmap 2024 just released a couple weeks ago. It's not in the current January SDK, but will be included in the next SDK. The VK-KHR roadmap will have any of the Khronos roadmap profiles there. So it will be updated. Currently has a 2022. It will be updated to have the 2024 roadmap. So I don't think we can hammer profiles too much. This is a really useful tool set. And I think people in the Vulkan ecosystem are still trying to understand why is it useful and how do I use it. And I don't think that we're wasting time by telling the story over and over again. Some examples of how profiles are used, the roadmap profiles. So Khronos, the Vulkan Working Group, uses these to express a guidance on what the future direction of Vulkan devices will be supporting. And again, those will be in the SDK and the KHR roadmap profile. Platform profiles is more the pragmatic usage of profiles for your Vulkan applications. It's a good way for you to specify what platforms you're targeting with your application. Included in the SDK is Google's Android 15 minimums. And also, Christoph spent some time putting together a LunarG desktop baseline profile that represents a large set of hardware that you'll see in 2024 if you want to make sure your application targets that large set of hardware. A device profile is just for a single device, and you can get that very easily by going to Sasha's gpuinfo.org. He will give you back a device profile. Engine profiles is a way for engine developers to express the requirements of their rendering code to prevent applications from requiring unavailable features on devices. In the tool set, there are 4 key tools. There's a schema, of course, the JSON data format to communicate about the Vulkan capabilities. There's the profiles layer. The layer is used during application development to ensure adherence to the requirements of a chosen profile. It simulates the capabilities. And with the validation layers is a powerful tool because you'll get an error then when you're trying to use capabilities not supported by the profile. There's the profiles library, which is a header-only C++ library that you can put in your application. It will check for profile support on a device and do the VK device instance with the features and extensions enabled for you. That's very useful to include in your applications. And then there's a JSON file generation tool that lets you generate profiles by combining multiple existing profiles. So you could do union and intersection of profiles, for example. Again, lots of tutorials are out there for offline viewing. If you want to know about this, the QR code that you see up on the right is Christoph's upcoming presentation. I think he's later today, if I remember correctly. He also presented in Munich a year ago. And so lots of links for you to go learn about the profiles toolset. And yes, the SDK has everything that we believe is relevant in the shader toolchain today. Could change, but the SpearV tools repository has a validator, optimizer, assembler, disassembler. All those tools are in the SDK. Of course, we have the GLSL to SpearV workflow with the GLSlang SpearV generator. And then we have the HLSL to SpearV workflow. You can get HLSL to SpearV from GLSlang, but it's only up to shader model 5. If you want later shader models, you need to use the Microsoft DirectX shader compiler, which we also include in the SDK. Shader C is a wrapper for better integration into build tools. SpearV Cross is included, which does some translation from SpearV shaders to other types of shaders, such as HLSL, Metal, etc. And SpearV Reflect is included as well. And there's a really handy tool that many people don't know about out there. I got a thumbs up from somebody out there where you can visualize your SpearV shader. So you should give that link a look. It's very handy. The table is moving. Okay, so that's the end of what I have, but I did talk about survey. We posted the 2024 ecosystem survey on the 1st of February. That QR code there in the left center will take you to the survey. Take the survey. Give us honest and useful information. We pay attention to the survey results. And also we are here in the back of the room. We have tumblers for all. Don't be shy. Grab your LunarG tumbler if you would like. And with that, I'll just ask if there are any questions.
And we've got time for one or two if you want.
It's better to have it recorded. So we have.
Hi. I was wondering if you could speak to the relationship between the Vulcan configurator and the ICD files and the and the profiles and how they relate to that, because it's kind of all that whole chain is a little bit unclear to me.
The relationship between the Vulkan configurator profiles and what was the third one?
No, the Vulkan profiles and the configurator.
So the Vulkan configurator is just giving you access to profiles that are in the SDK that you can select and enable to use them with the profiles layer.
The ones that you had listed.
Yes.
Okay. I
Yes.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.